Hi everyone, and welcome back out to Harvest Hills Ranch. If you're looking for more energy, which is a very common complaint that I hear from a lot of my patients, today I'm going to share with you a food that you should be including in your diet and 8 reasons that it should be there to help you produce more energy. Hi everyone, I'm Dr. Arland Hill, and I have a passion for all things nutrition, and that means everything from the farm to your family to the food that you consume. If it's related to nutrition, I have an interest in it and trying to help you find ways to optimize your nutrition. Now, like I said, a lot of folks that I work with as patients often complain of not having adequate amounts of energy. And all of us have probably had low energy from time to time, but what do you do when you start to have sustained low energy, when you know you're just not feeling like yourself? Well, you start looking for solutions. And sometimes we reach for things that maybe are going to be temporary energy solutions at best. But today I'm going to talk to you about a food that you should be including in your diet. And again, I'm going to share with you the reasons why. And this food is beef. Red meat beef is going to be what should be a consistent part of your diet. Now, why is that the case? Well, there are a couple of nutrients that you're going to find in beef that are very unique, and either they're not found in other food sources or they're not found in sufficient enough quantities in other food sources to have a true sustained therapeutic effect for you. So let me jump into this list here with you, and I think you'll have some appreciation. I'm also going to share a couple of pieces of evidence with you along the way to validate some of the things that I'm sharing with you here. So the first one on the list is going to be choline, and choline is it's unique to animal foods is where we're going to find that at. We do find it in other foods. Eggs are a great source of choline, but choline is unique in that choline is going to be a precursor to acetylcholine, and don't get bogged down on the names here, but by and large, the reason we want adequate amounts of choline is that this is going to help with speeding up our brain function. If we think about brain speed, cognition, you may interact with someone and just think about, wow, that's a witty individual. That's an individual that has the ability to generate adequate amounts of choline, or acetylcholine, which again is derived from choline. But point being on this is that when we look at the effects of choline, we see that these effects begin very early on in life. So this is not something that we have to wait till later in life to see the benefits of. And in fact, I wanted to share this with you. I found this study very interesting because it's a controlled trial, and it was looking at giving pregnant mothers choline, adequate amounts of dietary choline or supplemental choline in the 3rd trimester, so in that last trimester. And in short, what this study shares is that if we look at 480 milligrams of choline per day or 930, so twice that amount or approximately, what we find here is that the mothers that had the higher choline intake, if we look at the child, and these kids were followed all the way out into 13 months of age, what they found is that there was a significant benefit in terms of the processing speed of these individuals, in terms of their cognitive abilities. These were all better. And interestingly enough, even in the lower dose group, where it was 480 milligrams that was supplemented per day, there were also cognitive benefits there. But the point being for what I'm sharing with you here is that the greater the choline supplementation there, the greater the brain speed, the greater the efficiency of cognition, and that translates into your general energy throughout the day. Because one of the things that we have to differentiate when we talk about energy, are we talking about physical energy? Are we talking about mental energy? And there is a bit of a difference in how we approach these two things. Some of the underlying dysfunction can be the same, but this choline component is one of the ways that we differentiate how we approach that. Now, again, choline is not the only nutrient that we talk about here, but it's the first one I wanted to bring to your attention. The second one I want to bring to your attention here is going to be carnitine. Now, when we start talking about producing energy and having sustained energy production, when we don't have adequate glucose available to burn as our preferential energy substrate, then we need to be able to burn fats for energy. And sometimes that also means that we have to dip into our protein stores, but preferentially we would not like to have to do that. But to make use of the fats that we have, to take those fats and to run them into our energy production cycles, we need carnitine to be able to facilitate that. And if you've heard the name carne being an indication of meat, well, that's where this name comes from, carnitine or carnitine, and carnitine is going to have the greatest concentrations in red meat. It's found in other meat sources as well. White meats do have it, but red meat has a significant amount of it, and that ultimately is what's going to take that fat, and it's going to push it into the cell, and then ultimately push it into what are known as our mitochondria, our energy producing sites in the cell, and those are going to help us take these fats, these longer chain fats that have a lot of energy per molecule, and it's going to allow us to burn those fats efficiently for energy. So when we're able to do that, and we can get that long chain fat into the mitochondria, we can generate tons and tons of energy from that, but we have to be able to shuttle it in there. So carnitine is what's going to help us do that. Now, what about our next nutrient? So this is going to be our third one here. Well, it's going to be taurine. And sometimes when we start talking about energy, a lot of this has to do with neurologically how we perceive our environment. So if we're chronically bombarded with stress, and let's be realistic, most of us are by and large, when we look at that, that's a chronic excitatory state to the body. And one of the things that we have to do is we have to be able to calm down that excitatory state. If we feel ramped up all the time, we're going to feel run down. And taurine is a nutrient that comes from the red meat, from beef. And what taurine does is it has a calming effect in the body. So when we look at the calming side, the inhibitory side of the nervous system to create balance between excitatory and inhibitory, taurine is going to fall on that inhibitory side, and it's going to slow our brain activity down, allow us to be able to better mentally process things and not feel so wound up and uptight and then run down at the end of that period of stress. So this is going to keep us more even keel. It's going to keep us on a flatter curve, if you will, so that our nervous system is not oscillating up and down, and it's just nice, steady, and balanced as we go throughout the day. Now, the fourth nutrient that I'm going to bring to your attention is coenzyme Q10. Sometimes this is known as ubiquinone, but coenzyme Q10 is the more general term for this. Ubiquinol can be another name, but this is just semantics between whether we're talking about an oxidized or a reduced form, but let's just keep this simplistic here. And coenzyme Q10, where coenzyme Q10 comes into the energy conversation is that we can have a lot of nutrients in place. We can run the multiple steps of energy production, and by and large, we segregate this into three different areas, three different stages, if you will. When you get to that last stage, and you have to complete all three of these stages to produce significant amounts of energy every day, but that last stage has a large dependency upon coenzyme Q10. And if you can't get coenzyme Q10 adequately through that system, you're not going to see adequate energy production. Now, I want to show you something here, because sometimes I get the question, well, does the source of where I'm buying my food matter? Does the source of the meat matter? So should I just go the conventional route and get what I find at the grocery store, or should I seek out a better source of that? Well, if you'll notice here, I've got a study here for you. This is out of the Journal of Science and Food Agriculture, and this is doing a comparison between organic and conventional. And just to quickly bring to your attention on this, one of the things that was highlighted here, I just mentioned taurine. In fact, in the organic sources on this, in the higher quality meat, we see 72% more taurine. And when I say higher quality, these are just one of the rationale that I'm using for higher quality here. But we're on the topic of CoQ10, and you'll notice that 34% more coenzyme Q10. That 34% greater quantity of coenzyme Q10 translates to greater energy production for you. It also translates to greater antioxidant protection. And if you can protect these different components in the cell, those cells are going to be more efficient at producing energy. So there's two roles here. There's the energy production role of coenzyme Q10, but there's also the antioxidant protective role that it serves, where it's allowing the cellular structures to be more efficient at what they do. Now, let me go into the fifth nutrient, and this is really more of a category of nutrients here, and that's going to be our minerals. So when we start to talk about things like iron, zinc, copper. These are all well known to be in higher concentrations in red meat. So if we're thinking just maybe anemia prevention or good healthy red blood cell production to circulate oxygen around through our body, well, we know we need good adequate amounts of iron to do that, and there is no greater source, no more bioavailable source of iron than what is known as heme iron from our red meats, beef being a phenomenal source of that. Zinc. Zinc is going to come into this conversation. Zinc, we talk about heme forms of zinc. So if we want to have adequate uptake of zinc and to be able to use that zinc for us as males, for example, to generate adequate amounts of testosterone. And by the way, ladies, that testosterone is also important for you. That zinc that you're getting from red meat is going to facilitate all of that. And just to show you that just to correlate the benefits of that testosterone both in males and females, that does have an impact on our motivation and our desire, our willingness to go out and to do things and to tackle the world, if you will. So we want to make sure that we have adequate quantities of these nutrients. So that fifth category there being minerals. Well, what about number 6? Well, number 6 is going to tie into our macronutrients. So predominantly we are talking about our fats, our proteins, our carbohydrates, but predominantly for our conversation today, we're going to be looking at the fats and the proteins. And I have 2 components to this that I want to bring to your attention. And so the first way that these are going to help sustain your energy is that proteins and fats they take more effort to break down than carbohydrates do. So when we look at them by nature, they are more satiating. And that means that there's going to be a greater sustained delivery. There's going to be a slower, what's known as gastric emptying time. So we're not going to, those nutrients, those macronutrients are not going to leave your stomach and ultimately your small intestine as quickly. And so they're going to continue to deliver, whether it's amino acids to fuel your system or whether we're talking about the fats. And again, these long chain fats that we find in the fats in beef, those are going to be high energy molecules. So they're going to keep you going. They're going to keep you sustained. Now, what about another component here? Well, let's talk saturated fats for a minute. And I know sometimes saturated fats get villainized, but this is a problem because there's a couple of issues here. One is that those saturated fats aren't talked about in context most of the time, and they're also just talked about in relationship to total cholesterol and LDL, which and the relationship to cardiovascular disease. And there's a lot of problems with those arguments as well, and maybe arguments not being the best word there, but there's a lot of issues with the conclusions that are drawn from that. But what I want to bring your attention to is a specific saturated fat known as stearic acid. And this is a saturated fat that is in abundance in your fats in beef, and it has a direct impact on your energy production. And how does it do that? Well, it does it a couple of ways. One is that it's going to support triggering the satiety response, so your feeling of fullness and not feeling like you're still hungry. And when you do that, you're not reaching for these different quick energy sources in your diet, and that's not going to disrupt your energy production. You're not going to see the swings up and down. So that stearic acid is going to help keep that more of a flat curve for your energy production. It's also, because it's a saturated fat, it is not as prone to what we call oxidation, which generally stated is another way of saying inflammation. But this oxidation that is not going to be as detrimental to these saturated fats means that the cells are protected. They're not as susceptible to the inflammatory response, but it also means that when you look at the energy sites in the body, the energy production sites, the mitochondria, they have fat membranes around them too. And so they are not going to be as susceptible, and that means they're going to keep cranking out these energy molecules. So that stearic acid is extremely important. And also what we know from this is that stearic acid as a fat, this is not how we typically think about fats, but this is a role that they play. They shift the amount of energy that is produced per cell. So an interesting conclusion that we can draw there is simply how the fats in our diet influence our cells to be more productive at producing energy. So that's another reason we would want to go with beef, which is going to be higher in these saturated fats. Now, to no surprise, the last one that I'm going to include on our list here is B12. And I didn't want to start with this one simply because I didn't want you to jump off of the video. I wanted you to hear about all these other nutrients in beef and red meat that are going to be beneficial for your energy production, but we would honestly be amiss if we didn't throw B12 into this conversation as well. It's essential for producing good, healthy red blood cells. Our neurochemical production, which I'm going to throw you a bonus here and speak to in just a minute, is also dependent on B12 as well. So that is a key nutrient, and frankly, you just find it in higher concentrations in red meat than you do in other dietary sources. Now, what about this bonus that I just mentioned? Well, I have a great additional nutrient here that you absolutely have to know about, and I will tell you that this is one that I also lean on. And in fact, when we start talking about the amount of food, the amount of red meat that you're consuming in your diet, if you're consuming anywhere from, say, 6 ounces of red meat per meal or per day, you're going to have around about a gram, little more than a gram of tyrosine. Now, why is tyrosine so important? Well, let me pop up a study here because I want to show you exactly what has been shown with tyrosine. And this is indicating that the behavioral and cognitive effects of tyrosine intake in healthy human adults. And in short, what this does is tyrosine is a precursor to dopamine and norepinephrine. Now, why is that important? Well, dopamine and norepinephrine, dopamine is going to be associated with our motivation, our drive, our frontal lobe activity. And so if we have adequate amounts of dopamine, then we're going to be more energetic. We're going to want to get out there and we're going to want to do things. A lot of times when someone comes to me and they tell me, hey, I don't have adequate energy, my next question for them is, do you feel like you're motivated? Do you want to get up and do the things that you want to do every day? Do you feel like you get agitated very easily? If you do get agitated easily, little things, the kids maybe set you off that maybe otherwise that wouldn't have normally irritated you. So agitations, you get agitated easily. And then if you just have trouble sitting down and concentrating, these are all indications that dopamine activity is not as sufficient as it needs to be. And this all translates directly into how much energy you have throughout the day, how much you want to get up, and how much you want to go do things. And so those all suggest that tyrosine in the diet, and maybe even some supplemental tyrosine for a period of time, would be advantageous to you. But here's the bigger picture on this. If you want to drive energy production day in and day out, you don't want to just get into a situation where you feel like you're having to supplement your way out of a low energy state. One of the things that you have to absolutely include in your diet is going to be red meat, beef. And beef being the specific example I'm going to give you here, because a lot of these things that I've talked about are shown to be in beef, but other red meat sources do have analogous profiles as well. So I include those in your diet as well if you're looking to drive energy production. So with that being said, guys, I wanted to make sure I share this information with you because, again, I see low energy as a consistent problem out there, and it doesn't have to be. It just has to be. We just have to make the right food choices to offset this, and this is where it can start at. Hey, listen, if you are interested in finding out more about what I do in my practice, how I help patients out, the questions, some of the things that I ask them, just as I gave you some preludes here too today of ways that I can help them, check out drarlandhill.com. You'll find out a lot more information there about the services that I offer and ways that I help patients. If you are looking for grass-fed, grass-finished beef, if you are looking for pasture-raised poultry, if you're looking for laying eggs, duck eggs, chicken eggs, all these things that are raised out on pasture and raised with intention to drive as much nutritional density into the food as is absolutely possible, you need to go check out harvesthillsranch.com. That's the ranch that myself and my wife Leah own and operate, and we do not compromise anything. Everything that I've talked to you about in this video, those are the things that are in our mind as we're making management decisions and raising our animals the way you would want them to be raised. So with that being said, guys, I thank you for sticking around here to the end. Make sure you check out future videos where I'll bring you additional information in terms of the choices that you need to be making to optimize your health. Thanks again. I'm Dr. Arland Hill.